Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about disinvestment target of the government. Before moving on to the topic, let us see what is the current affair that relates to the disinvestment target of the government. Why this has become an important topic for the aspirants. The government seeks to meet its disinvestment target through buyback of shares by public sector undertakings. So, here the mode of disinvestment is by buyback of shares by the PSUs or public sector undertakings, and this mode of disinvestment has caused many concerns regarding whether they will be yielding the desired results. So we will analyze what are the challenges or shortcomings in such a mode of disinvestment. But before we discuss about the challenges, let us first understand what is disinvestment. Disinvestment means an organization or the government selling or liquidating an asset or a subsidiary or the shares. So if a company is selling its shares or assets or subsidiaries, we call it as disinvestment. So it can be either selling or liquidating. Liquidating means converting into cash. So here in the context of disinvestment, what is involved? Here the sale of government shares of a PSU is involved. In a public sector undertaking, there will be government shares and this shares are sold by the government. And who is buying the shares? It is brought by the PSU itself, and that is why it is known as buyback. Now let us understand what is meant by buyback of shares. Buyback of shares is a corporate action in which a company buys back its shares from the existing shareholders and the price will be higher than the market price. Now let us consider our case, what we are discussing now. Here the company is PSU. PSU is public sector undertaking and the existing shareholder here is the government. So what is the present situation? Now PSU is a company and in the company the government hold certain shares. So government is a shareholder in the PSU and there is some existing shares for the government. Now under buyback of shares, what is happening? The company, that is the PSU, is buying back the shares from the existing shareholder, that is from the government. So here the public sector undertaking is the company and it is buying the shares back from the government, which is a shareholder in the company. So this is meant by buyback of shares, and through this buyback it allows the company, that is here the PSU, to invest in themselves. They are making their own investment. Now they are investing in the shares of their own company. So this will increase the number of shares held by the company. Now in our example, the PSU is buying shares from the government. So what is the impact? The number of shares held by the PSU in itself will increase. And this is an investment made by the PSU in itself. PSU investing in the company itself. Now let us understand what are the objectives of disinvestment. When we discuss about the objectives, please keep in mind what is buyback of shares and what is disinvestment. Both the definitions please keep in mind. So first objective is to reduce the financial burden of the government. So how does this happen? The government is holding shares in the PSU, but under disinvestment, what is the plan of government? The government is planning to sell the shares to the PSU itself, or the PSU is buying back those shares. So how will it impact the financial burden of the government? Government is a shareholder and when this shareholder sells the shares, the government or the shareholder will get money in return. So this will reduce the financial burden of the government. Second one is to improve the public finances. So now when the government is selling the shares, the government will get money in return and this money can be utilized for financing public expenditure or meeting the public expenditure. So it will improve the public finances of the economy. Third one, this will introduce a competition and market discipline. So now the government is a shareholder and when government is selling the shares, it means the government has now lesser control on the company or on the PSU. So government control on the PSU comes down. It means the PSU is getting more autonomy. So more autonomy in turn will bring more competition and also market discipline. Market discipline in the sense that the profitability will increase. The objective of a market economy is to maximize the profit. So when the company or the PSU gets more autonomy, they can make more decisions of their own, which will increase the market discipline and the competition. Another objective is to fund growth. So in order to enhance economic growth in the economy, government will have to make investments, and it is known as public investment. And capital is required for making public investment or public expenditure. This can be in the form of infrastructure, job creation, social schemes, etc. So, from where will the government get funds? The government has limited resources to fund those public expenditure. So, now by disinvesting from the PSUs, the government will get funds for making investments in public expenditure or those expenditures that will enhance the economic growth of the economy. Now, another objective is to encourage wide share of ownership. Now, what is the situation of PSUs? A majority of the shares are held by the government itself. So, a major stake in the PSUs is held by government. Now, when there is disinvestment, this will allow wider share of ownership. The ownership gets extended. Now, these shares are bought back by the PSU itself. But later stage, what will happen? This PSUs will sell the shares to the private sector in order to bring in more profitability and more efficiency. So, this will enhance the share ownership of the PSUs. Another objective is to depoliticize non-essential services or activities. Because of a majority of shares held by the government, it has led to politicization and also bureaucratic interferences. Now, the PSUs will get more autonomy so that they can function independently, make their own decisions, which will lead to enhancing efficiency and profitability of the PSUs. So, these are all the major objectives of the government in the disinvestment plan of the PSUs. And government is targeting for disinvestment through buyback of shares. That is, the PSUs will buy back those shares held by the government. Now, let us understand what are the concerns in the target. What is the target of the government? In the Union Budget 2018-19, the government has fixed the target. The disinvestment target of the government is rupees 800 billion. But what is the concern in this target? This target is likely to fall short. The government may not be able to acquire this 800 billion target. The market conditions are not favorable for the government, and because of this negative or unfavorable market conditions, the disinvestment is estimated to be around 650 to 700 billion rupees. So, this means there will be a shortfall of around 100 to 150 billion rupees. Now, what are these market conditions? One is depreciation of rupee. Second one is inflation risk. Third one is increase in the cost of production due to higher oil prices. So, all this has affected the profitability of the PSUs. And when PSUs are making lesser profit, it cannot buy back the shares. It has to pay to the government or the shareholder when it buys back the shares. So, when it is not profitable, it is not possible to buy back all those shares. And that is why the target is not likely to be met. Now, let us understand what are the concerns with the buyback. That is, even though the government is able to meet the target, what are the concerns with the disinvestment or the mode of disinvestment? Now, here we have already seen what is the mode of disinvestment. Government is planning to disinvest from the PSUs by the way of buyback of shares. And who will buy these shares? The PSUs itself. What are the concerns in such a mode of buyback or disinvestment? The first one is efficiency. Now, the rationale of the government behind this disinvestment is to reduce the government's control over the PSUs. When the shareholding of the government comes down, this should reduce the government's control and will provide autonomy to the PSUs. And eventually, this will be transferred or passed on to the private sector. Now, there is buyback of shares by the PSUs itself, and later, these shares will be transferred or passed on to the private sector in order to increase the efficiency and also to enforce market discipline, which we have already discussed. So, private sector will be able to bring in more efficiency and more profitability in the PSUs. And in the long run, this PSUs will behave like other listed companies. Listed companies mean those companies which are listed on a stock exchange. And what are the characteristics of private listed companies? They are aimed at making profit, and it is through profit maximization that they will attract the investors. So, in the long run, this PSUs should also be able to attract investors in the stock market. Investors should be able to buy or should become attractive to buy shares of the PSUs. So this is the target of the government. But what is the concern here? These goals of the government may not be served by buyback. So there can be better modes of disinvestment than buyback, which will serve the purpose of the government through the disinvestment. Now second one is regarding the stocks. The buyback of the shares by the PSUs itself can have an impact on the stock prices. The stock prices can become high disproportionately. How is this possible? The market will get an intimation that the companies are doing well. That is why the PSUs are making buyback. When PSUs have more profit, what they will do? They are in a position, or they have the capability to buy back the shares. So this is the indication given to the market. So market will be given a wrong indication that the companies are doing well, and that is why they are buying back the shares. And for this reason, the stock prices will go up. But actually, what is the situation? It is because of the financial constraints of the government. But actually, what is the situation? It is because of the financial constraints of the government that the government is disinvesting in the PSUs. And this will have a negative impact on the prices of stocks or shares. The third one is regarding the fiscal deficit. The government is the principal owner of the PSUs. From the term PSU itself, it is very clear. Public sector undertaking. Those companies are owned by the public or the government. So now the government has certain shares in the PSUs. And what is the plan of the government? The disinvestment plan is to allow the PSUs to buy back the shares. So in effect, what is happening? Through the buyback, the resources are transferred to the government itself, because PSUs are owned by the government itself. So this buyback is not going to make much difference. What is the plan of the government? The government's plan is to meet the budgeted requirement of rupees 800 billion from the disinvestment receipts. Now the PSUs will buy back those shares, and if there is any loss, who will incur it? The government, because PSUs are owned by the government. Next concern is regarding the investments. Economic growth highly depends on revitalizing investment. Investment is one main component of economic growth. When the public sector undertakings buy back those shares which the government owns, what will happen? The investment will come down. The funds of the PSUs are used for buying back the shares. So they do not have money left over for making further investments. And lack of investment can affect the productivity or the output of the firms. So it will have a negative impact on the investments of the PSUs as well. You can find the PDF of this lecture on my Facebook page. Thank you so much and wish you all a very good day.